Hi, everyone. Welcome to Freight Marketing Gurus. I am Demand Gen, aka Jennie Malafarina, CEO of Virago Marketing and co-founder of Freight Movement. Today, we've got John McClymont on with us. John, before we even get in, tell us a little bit more about your background, where you're from, and what you're doing.
Yeah, for sure. So when I'm talking to an audience like yours, I like to say I'm a recovering shipper. So I spent the first 20 years the first sort of decade of my career in the food industry, kind of working from a manufacturer that was all vertically integrated. So essentially like a farm to table concept, if you really think about it, for how much was integrated there. I've always been in logistics, so working a lot with the supply chain piece of the organization, but my roles were more on the logistics side. Um, Working on different projects, working on sort of improvements, whether it's on the warehouse, transportation, or kind of like last mile DSD style deliveries, doing all of that kind of stuff. And then after the food industry, I moved on to the cash and transit industry. So instead of moving around food, we were moving around money. Also very interesting industry. And these days, I do my own thing, helping people kind of improve their revenues, cut their costs, kind of strategically build out their business, and do a lot on like the data and analytics side, because I've always used that as a big part of my career to make improvements and to make things better for the organizations that I was working with.
Yeah, so we typically target marketers, and marketers, going into the shipper space, we're putting you on the hot seat today because you are who you would want to talk to, and you've got a pretty strong perspective about how to break through the noise and what's appropriate, and kind of how the messaging needs to be framed. So that's kind of why we're putting you on the hot seat today, is to kind of get a better
That's all
understanding
good.
of how we can gain your attention, and how you think about things and how you think about solutions, and how you identify the appropriate solutions and make the decisions, how marketing plays into that, for various operations. So before we get started, let's go ahead and do the icebreaker. So if you could time travel to any era, past or future, what would that be and why?
So for me, I would go to the past. I don't know if a lot of people ask that question, but I would go to the past because I think that there's a lot of interesting things that people don't really understand how they happened. Like, how did the pyramids exactly get built, for example, and how did they build
Way back.
Stonehenge? So yeah, I would definitely go way back, and just to really try to understand what that is, because I think that there's probably a unique perspective there on sort of human ingenuity and how to get things done, that is very relatable to the fact that I think so many people these days are trying all kinds of different ways to figure things out. And sometimes we probably get stuck on not knowing how to do something, or something feeling too impossible. And I think a lot of those things from the past would probably give people a lot of insight and understanding about maybe what you can achieve even with probably simpler approaches than you might have thought
Yeah, like
originally.
building the pyramids, that seems like I mean,
Well, it seems
they
like it should have been impossible for them, right?
right.
Like it seems like they shouldn't have been able to do it. So it's
There's
like, well, how? You know what I mean? And how did they chunk that problem down into some, obviously tons of like probably people and labor and all kinds of resources. But, at the end of the day, they took a problem that even still seems impossible when we think about it. Like, how could they have done it, yet they got it done?
yeah. When you first said go back to the past, I was thinking of like, yeah, I want to go back to my childhood too. I wasn't thinking like way back. I was just thinking about when things felt simpler and easier and not so chaotic in today's world, I guess. Maybe that's just part of becoming an adult and growing up, but I miss those simpler times.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think that there's probably I think everybody lives with probably with their own little bit of nostalgia, right? Like, I mean, I talk to my kids all the time about the fact that, you guys are living in such a world of opportunity when it comes to tools and information and technology. And, if I could go back to school and have all of these things, it would be, a very different experience. And I don't mean just because of the fact that you can use these things to maybe get cheap answers, but I mean the ability to learn things and the ability to really kind of understand what you're going through at the time in a much different way, I think is extremely powerful. And I mean, it's even stuff that I encourage people these days, right? With AI, like, I mean, I think that there's the people who look at stuff like AI as hey, I'm gonna use it as an easy button. And then I think that there's a whole other stream of people that are kind of like, I'm gonna use it to enhance and kind of really give myself more opportunity, which I think is probably going to be the more winning strategy. But that's
Oh
definitely
yeah.
my opinion. So, yeah.
No, for sure. I'm actually appalled at how much like I don't think our kids know. Like they know so much about technology, right? But I don't think they actually know what tools they have available to them. So like I went to
Yeah.
a webinar yesterday about AI, and it was just tons of tools from making songs and making videos and making images and billboards and like all kinds of things that are just like use AI to do this, to do this, to do this, and it's like iterative. But I just like, I mean, today I'm like, that college paper would be super super easy with this stuff or these
Yeah.
math problems. Like, I mean, Claude, ChatGPT, you could take a picture, put it in, and say, "Help me solve this problem." Walk through it step by step. Like, I mean, when you talk about enhancing, it's not that it just solves the problem and tells you the answer, but it teaches you how to do it. Um,
Yeah.
and that,
Exactly.
that's what I love. Like, I'm actually trying to build automations within my business, and I use ChatGPT to walk me through and teach me how to use Zapier. Like, that's not my
Hmm.
that's not my forte, and I'm not saying Zapier just create this and go. I'm learning how to do it, which I think is a really cool skill set. I'm totally off topic, but I love
No,
it.
but it is. But I mean, I think realistically, tying it back into even what you're talking about with marketing and different types of things and ways to connect with people. Like, I mean, information. How do you get things done? How do you maybe create a system and a workflow for yourself that keeps your information and keep your thoughts kind of together? Like, I think that there's lots of ways that people can use it
Mhm.
to just make their everyday life easier. Like right now, I'm like sitting in the back of my mind where I'm like, man, I really need to kind of get on getting some of these tools set up to process my email the way that I want it to, and not just with basic filters and stuff, but it's like, put these things into these folders, but then I also want some kind of summary from the last 24 hours or the last week or whatever, so I don't lose track of things, right?
Do you have
um
a tool for that?
no, I don't. Well, I haven't looked into it, but I'm trying to think of how to get it all set up, because to me that's one of the things that I would want these days,
Yeah.
both on a personal side and on obviously a business and professional side. Just because I find that using some of these tools to quickly get at the type of information that you need
Mhm.
is extremely powerful and been very useful.
Yeah, I recently set up my inbox with like zero inbox. It's like a methodology, and it's like
Mm.
the automatic applications and filters. Now, what you're talking about seems a little more sophisticated. That's why I asked if you had a tool. But this is more and less like, okay, this needs action. This is awaiting a response. This is just something I need to be aware of. And then I have my inbox so that like I feel like it's better to manage, but I'm also finding that if you don't apply a filter, sometimes emails get lost. So
Mm.
technology is not always helpful. But so if I'm missing your email, sorry. Looking for them.
It's like I'm trying.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's dive into, okay, you told us a little bit about your background in shipping. What is your most recent position? What are you doing today?
Well, like my most recent position in a corporate context was when I was working in the cash and transit industry, and I was the director of strategy and transformation. That was kind of like a lot of continuous improvement, fleet management types of things like that. But for the last year now, I've been working for myself, kind of doing independent consulting. I say that very reluctantly because I don't like the connotation that consulting has for people. So consulting or like fractional work, really supporting different organizations that solve problems that um, I don't necessarily think that they always don't know, but I mean that they want to get a different value out of, right? Like I want to solve that faster. I want to get different perspective. I don't want to kind of come up with the solutions that maybe, we've always come up with. So kind of helping people break out of the box a little bit and challenge the way that they think. Hence the tagline that you allow on your StreamYard. But because I really do believe that. I think that it's counterintuitive for a lot of businesses to feel that they want to make improvements, they want to see change, and they want things to be different, but they put people in the same environment with the same groups with the same information from the same perspectives, yet somehow think that magically like some random idea is just going to pop out of the box. So I think when different companies engage with people like myself, for example, it's more on the concept of like a catalyst. You drop something new into the mix, it bounces around in different ways, and then the way that those ideas come out and the way that those solutions come out will just inherently end up being different than if you didn't do that.
Yeah. So you work with a lot of shippers. Shippers are
Mhm.
like the hot market for the industry, right? Everybody wants to talk to, well, I mean, if you have a solution for a shipper, right? Shipper, manufacturer, retailer. What do you think are the most common mistakes that service providers make when approaching shippers?
Talking about quality and SLAs. Because they like matter and everyone knows that you have to have them, but everybody says it. Like everyone's going to talk about it. You know what I mean? And I think when you and I first met, I joked about the fact that in all of the years and all of the phone calls I ever had, never not once did I get the call from the carrier or whatever that was like, hey, I'm XYZ Freight and we're kind of like your basic carrier. We're okay. We only have like 75% SLAs. Like this person, these people don't exist and nobody makes cold calls that way. So, everybody builds a lot of their pitch around the quality of their performance.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important, but the reality is that if I'm a shipper, like I'm not even going to entertain someone that's not that good. So it should be a non-issue, because if you tell me that you only can deliver 2 out of 3 loads every week accurately, like I'm not going to touch you anyway. Like I only want the person that feels they can do, the 3 out of the 3 loads all the time. Right. Like nobody is looking for that person that has got a high failure rate.
Right. So I think what we kind of coined when we were on the phone was like, not everybody's the best. Like you can't call and say you're the best at something. And you've got to really figure out what differentiates you, and you should not discount yourself. So how do you feel like you mentioned kind of a carrier perspective. How do you think carriers can differentiate themselves when making phone calls into shippers? It's that they can do all the loads, or
No, I think, I think the first thing is that you probably want to try to focus more on being able to get some activity and create the right kind of relationship and have the opportunity to showcase more of yourself. Right. So, very often there's 2 kind of things that would happen. One, you'd either get someone that would essentially call you and say that they would take like anything. It's like, just give me anything and I'll get it done. And they take that approach, which kind of is like a red flag. It's like, so you're just going to take anything. You haven't asked me any kind of real information. You don't really know what I'm doing. You don't know what my expectations are. You just want to take something. So that in itself seems like a red flag. And then on the flip side, I think trying to get something, but it not being anything is important. So it's like, where does that particular carrier have areas of strength? Where can they show that they have a lot of experience maybe in this type of industry? Or how do they show experience, for example, that they're maybe very good with high expectations on the procedural side, right? Because not all businesses are just, very basic drop and go kind of like pick and leave activity, right? When I was in the food industry, it was like, you got to come into the sites, you got to maybe go into this office, that office, speaking to this person. You're picking up these different trailers. You may or may not be responsible for it. There might be a checkout process. There's maybe a seal process that you have to be involved in the trailers. Like there could be all kinds of different things that maybe, a particular business is doing. But, show that you're maybe more inclined to it. Because one of the big things for me was that we were very procedural, because it was food, because it was fresh food, and it was very sensitive. Like, we had to make sure that we had people that were doing certain things. And quite frankly, a lot of the asks were not necessarily standard for someone that thought they were doing like even full truckload movements that for the most part just drops pin to pin.
And what about from like the tech provider standpoint? So you mentioned like the carriers coming in and learning the operations and seeing the process, especially in food. What about like tech providers? And then like furthermore, how do you get in the door? Because like it almost sounds like you're saying you can pick up the phone and call and say, hey, I want to come in and learn more about your operations and that. And I don't know any shippers, picking up the phone or even like getting through like the firewalls on emails. So like, how do you break through the noise? How do you get their attention to even create an opportunity to come in and learn more about the operation?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, I think because of the fact that so many people are being solicited all the time,
Mhm.
um, that's definitely an issue. Um, you know, I do think that you can still get through to people. I think it's for sure harder, and I think you have to probably be mindful of like when you're calling them as well, right? Like, you know what I mean, in terms of even day of the week or time of day. Um,
Any tips on that? Any
Well, I mean, I
things?
was I was always open, right? Like I think probably one of the easiest things that someone could do would be, for example, not necessarily trying to get the freight right away, but like if my objective isn't to get a load from you, but my objective is to let you know that, hey, I'm interested and I'd love to chat with you. I'd love to be able to be included in, whether it's an RFP, whether it's a project, whether it's a whatever. Like I think that that's more interesting because, you have to remember that even though shippers don't like being solicited all the time, like, whoever's in those roles still has the responsibility of making sure things get done. So they're going to have constant cost pressure on them. They're going to have like the need to mitigate risk, for example. They're going to be constantly reevaluating their um carrier base there and the people that they're using, just because of the fact that there's always that internal pressure from a shipper as well, right? Transportation is viewed as an area that has to kind of be kept very lean,
Mhm.
right? So it's always a topic of conversation. So how do you make your goal more about the fact of like, look, I just really want you to think about us, maybe check us out if you have any questions or whatever. Like those types of pitches are you're far more receptive if it's like, look, I'm not trying to sell you right now. I don't expect you to actually give me any freight over the phone. I'm not trying to do a hard pitch. My goal is to be like, how do I get you at least knowing that I'm out there, or how you can find out more about me? I think that that's a very different approach.
And I love that because I feel like that's more about the human touch and building relationship versus the sales and business. Like at the end of the day, everybody's humans and they want connection. And if you build relationships and you build trust and you show sincere interest in what they're doing and helping them improve their operations and operate leaner, then they're more likely to want to partner with you. Is that an accurate statement or?
Yeah, I think for sure, right? Like, I mean, at the end of the day, there's no shortage of people that try to solicit the work. So, I think it's like any area. I think it's like anything in life, right? People tend to gravitate to the ones that, either made a good impression or that they felt were either professional or whatever. And I mean, I think that there's a lot of other ways that you can break into, right? Like there's like the cold outreach, for example. But, if you understand how that shipper operates today, for example, like, can you speak to the retail stores, for example, that they might be interacting with? Can you speak with like the vendors? Like, for example, I was in the cold chain, like kind of part of all of that. Well, if I'm a carrier, maybe I'm speaking to like, the providers like a Thermo King, for example, or whatever, that and carrier that sell these things. And not to say that they have to make recommendations, but I mean, even working those relationships so that like, if I'm as a shipper saying, hey, like, have you seen anyone interesting? Is anyone using these new types of equipment? Are you seeing people investing in these newer trailers, blah, 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 whatever. I mean, there's different ways that you want to get your name out there.
Yeah.
I think, and I think these days too, trying to make yourself like more aware, right? Like things like LinkedIn, I think are a good opportunity. There's a huge part of the social world that's like dark social, where even if you're not seeing people engage or you're not seeing directly like liking posts or whatever, that doesn't mean they're not seeing it.
Right. Right. So what is the best approach to get to shippers? So you said like the cold calling, right? Like there's still a place for that. The
Mhm.
inbox has the firewalls. Are shippers still attending shows? Is that a hot place? When you go to market and you think about the brand awareness, should we be in print publications? Should we be in digital? Like where do you think most shippers would engage with a marketing message or, looking for solutions?
Well, I think it depends on like, who you're trying to get to and where. So like as an example, so the organization that I was with, like we managed a lot of our own assets. So we would actually very often participate in like um industry style events that were more about like, let's call it like the equipment and the hardware, right? Because we were looking for trailers, we were looking for reefer units, we were looking for different solutions. Like we were looking for it because we had our like, we didn't have all of our own fleet. Like we owned the trailers, carriers would have the power units, for example, but the fleet people, the transportation related people, or everyone doing that kind of management would very often participate in these type of industry events. just because of the fact that, like, we're always looking, like, again, we're trying to keep costs down, we're trying to improve the business, we're trying to look for other ways to, make ourselves more profitable. So,
Mhm.
that was one area. I think for a lot of shippers, the concept of just going to some of these more um like open connecting type shows, like, most shippers know what they're getting into. And I think that the other big problem is that everyone says that they're chasing shippers, but, like, that's not really true. Like, they're chasing a very specific type of shipper, which is understandable. But the thing is that, like, if your target customer is like, oh, I need the $50 million plus accounts, okay, well, so does everybody. And I can most certainly tell you that anyone that's got that kind of spend doesn't wake up every day wondering how they're moving their freight. Like,
Right.
they have solutions in place, they have expertise there. Those people have ways to go about getting out there. So you can try to be connecting with people on LinkedIn, for example, that are in these positions and in these roles, but again, not to necessarily solicit, but just to build relationships, to get them to know you're out there, to be able to send them messages or to be able to have conversations with them. Because again, like, my spend over the last part of that career was anywhere from 50 million to $100 million a year of OPEX. Like, I can certainly tell you, I never once was like, oh my God, how am I going to get a load moved? Like just never came up.
Right.
Right. So if I don't have that kind of need, like, why would I just be all of a sudden, like, entertaining all kinds of random questions, and sort of entertaining different offers from people and then just randomly giving out loads? Like, I didn't really have a need for it. And the reality is, the more people I test, the more potential failures, the more potential issues, the more setups I had to do with finance to get these people paid. Like, it's not really an easy
So
process per se.
so it sounds like you're suggesting that like enterprise shippers that are doing 50 million plus are kind of set. Like people are chasing them, but they don't really have a need, so they're less likely to entertain all the phone calls and solicitation, and that it's smarter for a provider to come in at maybe a lower tier in the market. Is that
Well, I think it depends. Like, I mean, for example, if you want to work with, like, a big retailer that is very known for, like, their blue and their yellow logo, like, well, there's no lower market. Like, you're either going to work with them or you're not, right? But I think you really have to understand, like, how do these people go about it, right? RFPs are obviously one way that a lot of shippers will get in. Sometimes different retailers or grocers or whoever it could be might have, like, programs that you have to apply to, and then maybe you eventually get some type of freight there.
so? So it kind of sounds like it's not marketing. Like it's
I
more
don't
of like the relationship and the RFPs and the cold calls.
Well, I guess I think marketing in the sense of, like, you know in the true sense of marketing, it's like, if you show, like, hey, what are the type of problems in the market and how do you kind of address them, and, like, what do you guys do there differently? I
Mhm.
think you can. I think where most people get kind of, like, stuck is that they see big corporations that they know have big activity levels, and then they think that because there's so much, they only need this 1% of the pie thinking, and I just want to get in the door. But
Mhm.
it's like, okay, but everybody thinks that way. And if I managed my business that way, I would have this, like, nonstop stream of, like, issues that are so small and annoying to me that it's not really worth it.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why I think it really depends on, like, how do you form the right type of relationships and how do you get into some of those businesses. But the other thing is that those bigger businesses are always going to have much longer, like, sales cycles. Like, if you think about it, right? Like, because even though they have so much activity, like I said, there's no dire need. Like, they're not struggling in a way of, like, not knowing what to do or not having a whole book of options they can call on.
Right. Right. Um, I was going to ask. Uh, Never mind. I forgot. We'll keep going. So when service providers pitch their value, where do they have to miss the mark in addressing the shipper's real need?
Honestly, I think most people sell for themselves, right? Like, I've literally had people just call and be like, "Do you have any loads for me? Like, any kind of load, like, we'll do it. We're happy. We're a great carrier." But I mean, like that's about you. The reality is that you needing a load is about you. You need the revenue, you have the capacity, you need to fill trucks. Like, that's not a me problem as a shipper. I don't have that problem. Like, you know what I mean? So that's why it really needs to be more about trying to understand like where I might be having problems, and then that where you might be willing to essentially, and I know this is going to sound probably not that great, but like you're going to have to do something that everybody else isn't going to want to do, because everybody is happy to do a point to point, like low touch, simple move.
Sure.
Like everybody is willing to do that. So it's like, where do you start showing that you're willing to maybe add more value or do things differently than what other people don't? So, hey, you know what? Like, for example, like we do, you know, we make sure to archive all of the bills of lading. We send them over this way. We do our own auditing process. Like we do X, we do Y, we do this. Like, you know, we do different kinds of things that are essentially going to, well, yeah, like, and take things away from the shipper, like where there might be problems today. You know what I mean? Or, you know, we do really well. Like we'll focus, for example, on a lot of the freight that might be more challenging, which might be running through the cities at the worst times of the day, right? Like, I mean, there's all kinds of things that, for example, that you can start to say that, you know, you focus on, or that you've developed some kind of approach for, that you feel makes sense for everybody. Because I can tell you, it was, no one ever loved doing those sort of trailer moves, like when it started getting close to rush hour.
I'm sure.
You know what I mean? Because I didn't really want to pay more for it. It cost more to do. So, you know, you're trying to find these balances of like what makes sense and how it makes sense and things like that. So that's usually the thing, is that people don't focus on really what a shipper would need. They focus on the fact that, hey, you have so much freight, and me just doing loads is what you need, which is not the case at all.
So I remember what I was going to say. Are consultants untapped sources for communicating value from providers that would then share and encourage help with decision making with the shipper, like yourself? I feel like many times tech providers, service providers aren't leveraging necessarily consultants who have the ear of the shipper and help them make decisions, which, I mean, obviously, like, you need to be aware of all those solutions and stuff like that, but having a relationship with someone like yourself seems like that would be advantageous, so that if somebody came to you for your expertise and said, hey, do you know anybody that does this, you'd be able to communicate that.
Yeah, for sure. So it's definitely something that you can do. Honestly, it's a bit of a shady, it's a bit of a shady part of the industry too, because I'll tell you straight up, there's tons of pay for play kind of activity going around, right? Like, I think I don't go a day where someone doesn't try to say, hey, let's form a partnership. Let me see what we're doing. And of course, we'll compensate you for any like leads and stuff that you close. So, you know, it can be an avenue there. I think you have to be mindful though of the fact that it's not unique. And then at the same time too, I think, you know, it does create an interesting kind of gap for shippers, because it's like, well, are you getting the best advice from people? Are you just getting who pays more? And, you know, I think you always want to make sure you're getting the best advice, but I can tell you, I definitely see some stuff where I see people promoting stuff that I've said no to, and they clearly haven't, because I can see the offer and stuff like that. So I think it can be a possibility. And I do think that there's definitely an opportunity there, like, you know, from shippers and at least getting the information. So I think that there's always value in trying to make sure that, you know, you're connected to different people, that they're aware of your services and all of those things. But I still think that it's not, I don't think it necessarily makes that many more closes right away. Because like I said, for any one business, like that one consultant or whoever that you might have approached, that like they've probably already gotten 100 other offers to do the same kind of thing.
Yeah, but I guess I wasn't even thinking of it as like a paid, you know, lead gen model. I was just thinking of it as like, hey, you're responsible for having conversations and advising your clients on the solutions available to them for various activities. Here's the ones that I know of. But it sounds like you're saying that like that's usually a pay to play.
No, I'm saying a lot of people will reach out for that, hoping that. I do agree with you that I think that, you know, the more people that know like sort of what you guys are doing, like where you're targeted, like, you know, where your strengths are, how you do things a little bit differently, for sure, I think that matters. I think though that it comes hand in hand with the fact of saying you're more trying to sort of plant the seeds, you know what I mean, and create opportunity for the future. So it would be a much slower
Yeah. Yeah.
cycle. Like you know what I mean? Like so that's what it is. I think if people are doing it properly and sharing about their business and putting it out there and not immediately expecting like some quick ROI
Right.
on lay down leads, then I think it has a lot of value. Because I can tell you in that regard, people just trying to share information broadly, there's not too many people who are doing it just to try to like legitimately make sure that there's good awareness of their business and you know what they can do and what they target and how. And that is not as prevalent as people just looking for the quick, like, you know, give me the referral and, you know, we'll pay you a commission.
Okay. How do you how do you think smaller service providers can differentiate themselves from larger competitors in like undervalued areas?
So I, you know, this is like an idea I've shared multiple times, but I really do think that more providers have to take on a little bit more. Like
Okay.
the base service, like, you know, picking, you know, being reliable, picking up the load, getting it there undamaged, you know, making sure the signatures are done, like having those high SLAs, like as hard as it is to actually do that sort of 365 and 7 days a week and all of these things, that's table stakes. Like you're just going to have to accept the fact that those are not differentiators. So then it becomes like, what more can you do? Like on the reporting side, for example, like how do you kind of quickly highlight, you know, where the shipper's activity seems to be making sense, but you know, where it might not. Like, and I can tell you that almost no service provider will suggest something that has a negative impact to themselves. And I know that sounds like obviously why would anyone do that? But here's the thing is that if you want to be a real business partner to that shipper and there's an activity that you're doing that really doesn't make sense, you're like, hey, you guys have me doing like, and I'll just make this super easy, which is not happening, but it would highlight it. Hey, you have me doing a half trailer every day. And then every day when I go to that particular warehouse or whatever, and I drop it off, or I go to that retail store, they haven't even touched the stuff from the day before. Like, you know, it's still sitting there. I think you guys should not send it every day. You could probably get away sending it just twice or maybe every second day, like 3 times a week.
Mm.
Like that's less activity for the shipper, because you know they're not going to, or sorry, for the service provider, because they're maybe not going to get as many loads that they can bill out, but it's the right thing for the business.
Yeah.
And then those types of things are actually what stay really sticky, because it's like, okay, this person now is helping me, like they're a real partner. And that becomes more valuable, because anyone will just take transactional stuff and everyone will just kind of do what you keep asking them, but
Yeah.
kind of taking more ownership of being like, how do I help this shipper be better on their cost base or do something that makes more sense, even if short term it's not good for me. Because then the long term thing is, when I'm thinking about that next set of activity or that growth phase, I'm going to work with the people that I feel are either more professional, better partners, like are going to help kind of keep things as tight and
Do what's
aligned
in
as
your best
possible.
interest, not
Yeah.
necessarily theirs. Yeah. That makes a lot of
Yeah, exactly. Because the thing is that you know, it doesn't create a good thing when I find a bunch of stuff that doesn't make sense, and then, you know, the carrier's kind of like, oh yeah, okay, I see that, or whatever, like, you know what I mean, or they admit to it after the fact.
Yeah. But it's making their wallets fatter. But at the same time, it's tarnishing the relationship, because if you could help the shipper save money, identify areas to be more profitable, be more lean, then demonstrate true partnership, that will most likely result in a longer relationship that will be more profitable in the long run.
Yeah, exactly, right. And I think, you know, a lot of people have to decide on, you know, what they want, people like what kind of customers they want and how they want to use their customers. Because so many service providers get really focused on the fact of like just looking at the loads and then looking at, you know, the profitability. But it's like, if you're going to look at your business as a whole, you know, you probably have to appreciate the fact that there's different value propositions even that different shippers have for you. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Certain ones may not be the best profit wise, you know, per load or whatever, but they might be very consistent, and they might give you a strong baseline so that then you can use that to, you know, more easily solicit other kind of business, for example. And then on the inverse side, some will be very profitable or really great when they come up, but they're very inconsistent. And then you understand like, okay, well, how do I, leverage these people in? And then you're going to have other types of people that are kind of a little bit more in the middle where, they're less consistent, better profitable. And how do you stitch all of that together instead of just treating all of your customers the same and with the same lens? It's understanding that your business is going to thrive by having like a good mix of customers, because they all won't be the same. Like all the shippers won't be the same.
Yeah. So as the logistics industry evolves, what role do you think technology plays in shaping service provider value propositions? And we kind of touched on like the ability to do like reporting. So being able to identify areas where they can make you more successful, that's one role of technology. But is there any other role of technology playing here that can make your relationship more attractive?
Yeah, I think, I think probably still the most under serviced area in technology is getting to what matters, right? And I think a lot of the technology that's come out has kind of gone the other way of being like, I'm just going to give you everything and give you access to everything, which is in itself not bad. But I was on a different kind of webinar I was watching the other day, and one of the providers that's a newer enterprise showed their dashboard, and it honestly was really great from a technology perspective. It gave all the information. You could see all of the shipments. You could see everything that was there.
Mm-hmm.
But it was honestly too much. Like I can tell you from a shipper, like I would never want to go in. Like I'm not going to care about the 1,000 lanes I did that day per se, because if they're all green, I don't have any problems, and I've got 100 other things I can check rather than just being like, "Ooh, it's all green." Where I think that there needs to be more use for technology in the space is how do you improve communication and the speed of that communication, and how do you more quickly give people and I really like to think of like the stoplight style system. Like, how do you quickly show them like, hey, here's your 1,000 loads, 990 of them are green. You don't even we're really cooking well, but here are the 5 that are yellow and here are the 5 that are in red. Right. And these ones that are in red, here's the specific stuff that's going on that you probably need to manage. Right. Yeah. And I think that that's probably where there's the biggest gap in technology. And it's funny because when I was in the corporate world and doing a lot of work, one of the things that I used to do with my teams would be always having to coach them on how to do different types of reporting. And so many people think that if you can give a report that just gives everything, you've given the best quality, but that's not true. You want to, the best reports are the ones that get to the most actionable information as quickly as possible with providing the right context, right? So it's harder to make things more compact and more concise and giving people just what they need to know than it is to give them everything. So I think that that's probably the area that really needs to improve still in the logistics space.
So I saw a solution the other day that was, its intent is to be custom to your KPIs. So you have everything, but then you can customize it to your KPIs. And that's really where they just focus, is like, it's not like we tell you the KPIs, it's just you pick your KPIs and you can put the data. Is that a more appropriate way of going? To me, when I saw it, it's kind of like you said, it's like, it's just kind of overwhelming. But I guess if you can identify your own KPIs, then you can just kind of get down to what's important to you. But for me, I was like, some ways I like the out of the box, tell me what my KPIs are, almost as like this industry benchmark.
Yeah, I do think that there are some, for example, that it's definitely helpful if you have if you have like your own KPIs and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Because like not every industry is going to look at the same customers in the same way, or the same ones are going to matter. So I think having the ability to kind of create your own is good. But to your point, honestly, like certain things are just like are almost like industry standards. So it's like you can have some baseline. I think where a lot of people fall down is that they either try to over engineer and give like a shipper or a provider like everything that they think is important, which I can almost guarantee you, you don't know enough about their business to know everything that's specifically important to them.
Mhm.
So having the ability to add on, but I think, you do have to have like the, let's call it like a common 5, or, your top 10 types of things. And I think probably where there's more of an opportunity than just creating your own, it's like, how do you allow customers to maybe choose the information that they more quickly want to see, and how? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, what's more important to me, or what's more important to me at a particular time or not? You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with that. I was just kind of overwhelmed with like, well, what's my KPIs? And like, how do I build that versus like you give me those industry standards, and then maybe it's something that evolves and it's nice to have that customization. But um, right out of the box, I just felt a little overwhelmed with like having access to all KPIs and really zeroing in on what's really important to measure. Um,
For sure. And especially too, like, honestly, not all KPIs will work as well for every customer. It really depends on the quality of the data that you're getting. Like, you know what I mean? Not every organization records the same amount of stuff. Not all of them record it in the same way. So, you really got to make sure that, like, that it's dialed in specifically to your system. And I think that that's probably an area that can improve too, is that I think more systems need to have a little bit more flexibility for, um, let's call it like customized data fields and stuff like that, and give more opportunity for a different level of segmentation.
Sure, sure. So, kind of getting back to the messaging component of this, how important is it for service providers to align their value propositions with like broader industry shift, like sustainability or digitalization, digitization?
Well, so I'll give you my real honest answer about it, is that it doesn't really matter what the industry is doing if it doesn't matter to the customer. You know
Okay.
what I mean? If on as much as anyone wants to say, for sustainability, if they're not focused on it, doesn't really matter. If they feel that they're already very tech enabled and very digital already, talking about the industry going more digital doesn't really necessarily matter. And if they have certain things that are non-standard that matter more to them, then it matters, right? Like, the whole concept of a value proposition is creating value for the person buying. So what can you do to create the right value proposition in their mind so that they feel that they're getting the best ROI for what they're transacting with, which is essentially paying you for a service?
How do you think someone would know that if that like they have interest in sustainability or not? Because I was at an event the other day and a big shipper was talking about sustainability, and it's a huge initiative for them, but they do RFPs and there's like almost like a scoring model for determining who they're going to work with, and sustainability is a component of that, but it doesn't necessarily win.
Yeah, well, exactly. And I mean, I think sustainability, unfortunately, is a really difficult um, kind of place to hang your hat these days, because everybody wants it, but nobody wants to pay a premium for it. Because the problem is that even if I charge a premium for it and I'm willing to pay for it, my competitors aren't, which means that if it translates into the final price of my products or my service to an end consumer, and they start choosing a lower cost alternative because they don't have the same values, it puts pressure back on the retailer to then be like, yeah, I want it, but I don't want to pay more for it. But if it costs more, that means it's going to eat into profitability, of a carrier or of a service provider. And I think it becomes part of a balanced, like, portfolio. And, like, how do you incorporate in a way that makes sense for your business, that doesn't dramatically increase your cost? Or what can you do on a sustainability side that has an impact, for example? So, you know one thing, one of the more sustainable things you can do, like, for example, like, you can have EVs and you can have, like, these trucks on the road as much as you want, but what's the most sustainable thing on the planet? Doing less activity.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, it's great that you move from fossil fuels to, like, batteries and stuff like that, but, like, let's be real, pulling that, like, lithium and cobalt and all of these things out of the earth is still not as sustainable. Like, to support 500,000 trucks is still not as sustainable for the planet as a flow of activity that wouldn't need 500,000 trucks and wouldn't need 500,000 batteries. You know what I mean?
I feel like if you have organic sustainability, like ingrained into your business, then it makes sense to promote that, because that's part of your differentiation. There are solutions that are closer to the end user in densely populated areas, reusing pallets, reusing mall space. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're that is part of who they are. So I think it's important to communicate sustainability as part of their message. And I think there's probably companies that would align with that. But I think there's just value in what they have to offer that innately encapsulates sustainability.
Yeah. Like I think, doing something in a much more sustainable way, and then doing it at essentially like a price that is comparable to market, I think helps your value proposition. I think, going down the sustainability path and hoping that it allows you to be 25% higher than market, I think is going to be extremely challenging. Like, you know what I mean? Like it erodes your value proposition to the shipper. It's because even if they want it, they may have a hard time making that much of an investment.
So what about a solution that can help you reduce deadhead, which would reduce carbon footprint? Is that an attractive solution to a shipper? Because we talked about, like, instead of moving half a trailer every day, move a full trailer 3 times a week, right? So instead of running a truck empty, just we can identify different routes to ensure that you're not running, deadhead. So, like, and that's reducing carbon footprint, which is, sustainability initiatives. Is that attractive to shippers?
Yeah, I think you'd have to make sure to understand, like, one, are they doing it and why are they doing it, right? Because, sometimes people will do like, a half trailer load just because it's easier to book like the full trailer load price than it is to go LTL for that many pallets or for that weight. And they could be doing things like that. But they could also have other reasons for it. Like, for example, like when I was in the food industry, the product was extremely sensitive to smells. There was all kinds of stuff that you couldn't put on it anyway. That being said, when I had a carrier come back to me and say, hey, we've already got this lane that runs this way, your product would totally fit. We've been kind of checking the numbers. There's nothing on it that would have a real issue. Do you want to try it? For sure. It was totally open to doing it and saving those things. So I think getting that real intimacy and understanding of their business is where you can start suggesting that. So I put that more into the area of like, what are you doing for your shippers that helps them improve their business? So, that kind of gets into the more the value add and being more of a business partner. I think that some of those things are a little hard without knowing, right? Because like the odds of you randomly guessing that they've got this kind of problem that you're going to solve without knowing anything about their business, I think would be really hard to land on.
Yeah. So it sounds like you got to get in the door and understand their business and build a relationship. And from a marketing perspective, case studies help tell that story, that you were able to partner with them, understand their business, where they can make changes, be more profitable, operate more lean, that sort of stuff. That would probably be attractive to gaining the attention of other shippers.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think that people need to do a lot more these days to try to understand what's going on, right? Like, you know, a lot of the stuff I write, people are like, "Oh, where are you getting these comments? Like, where is this coming from? Like, where are you getting these insights?" Oh, you want to know where? I'm talking to the drivers, talking to the people who are actually doing loads, and not necessarily in a way of like, "Hey, give me your company secrets," but I mean, there's so many people that are sharing information or that are talking about their struggles and stuff like that. And, you can learn a lot from hearing the feedback from the front line. So it's like, I mean, I think if you're looking to try to understand a shipper, it's like, can you talk to, the stores that they're in? Can you talk to free, like, and I don't mean in like a creepy, like whatever way, but like, as these things come up organically in conversation, it's like, if you know the type of customers that fit your profile and, you're already delivering with some, you're asking the different warehouses, you're asking the retail stores, you're asking like the grocery, the back rooms at the grocery stores or whatever it is about their receiving, sometimes even just observing, right?
Mm.
If you really want to sell somewhere and I'm selling to a retailer that's in a mall, well, go to the mall. Who's showing up? how much freight does it look like is coming off that truck? Like if you're in the mall and you're watching deliveries go into the store, like what does it actually look like? There's all kinds of ways that you can start to build up a little bit more information. I think unfortunately is that we've leaned a lot to the fact of hoping that we can just make a call or send an email, get some freight and do this, when that works in some percentage and it worked at a period of time. But the reality is that like people are inundated with offers now. There's no shortage of anyone trying to get someone's business.
Right. That's why I call the shows like shark infested water, because what shipper wants to go on an expo floor with all the solutions and just pretty much be attacked? Like, so and if everybody's going to the shows to meet shippers and demonstrate their solutions, are the shippers there? And you had mentioned like, oh, we went to equipment shows. That has nothing to do with selling you logistics services, but you're going to what is important to you. So like maybe it's showing up in the unexpected places.
Yeah, for sure. Like, different types of, testing. Like I remember at one point when they put the wings like on the trailer to like limit the drag and stuff like that. Like when there was doing a lot of testing on that, well, people from the organization were going, right, to watch these tests and to see what was going on, or to see these like different innovations and stuff like that. So I mean, I think that there's lots of different ways to go out there. But I mean, it really, I think is an area where if your goal is maybe just to try to connect with people and get them used to understanding who you are rather than just trying to make a sale, I think it dramatically changes the way that you're going to get there. Because you have to get, if you want a shipper, if you want to get a shipper to kind of even think about you or whatever, they have to trust you. And I don't necessarily mean that they have to trust you in a way that, oh my God, like, this person can take care of my baby kind of thinking.
Yeah.
But it's like, they have to trust in how you're going to respond or how you're going to say you're going to do something. Right. So like trust can be built both ways. So it's like, if they know that, Bob's Freight Service, is always talking about like, these types of markets, and these types of industries, and here's what they do. And like, that's their message. And you've got to repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. Right. And get it out there. And that's why I'm saying like, even stuff like posting on LinkedIn or doing different types of things, the amount of conversations that I have with people that start with like, oh, I love what you write, or I love what you shared here, from people that have never commented on a post, or that have never liked a post, or have never engaged with me in any way, but they're still seeing all of that content. So it's like, how do you put that messaging out there, and how do you kind of live those values and showcase the types of things that you do? Because people are watching.
Yeah.
They are watching and stuff like that. And then trying different types of, I think you do try the events. I think you do try different types of social platforms. Like, of course, you should still run ads and maximize your SEO. And people are always looking for areas to incorporate. And then how do you have, discussions with those warehouse people? How do you have discussions with people at the mall? How do you have discussions with repair shops? Maybe even, for example, if someone's got owned assets, right? Like, when I had all of those trailers, I had a lot of relationships with different repair vendors, right? It's like they could always suggest, hey, like these guys do this. I work with them all the time if you're ever interested. And sometimes those like other little warm leads make big differences.
Yeah. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with like leveraging partnerships, in the sense that like having these networks, having these relationships. You might be partners with like the repair shops and stuff. And if somebody comes in and asks for a referral, they're more likely to say you, because you guys have some sort of established relationship and there's some sort of trust there.
Yeah. And I think more than anything else, probably where people don't spend enough time is nurturing the relationships that they already have, right? Like, so very often, the marketing and the sales aspects about getting the deal, closing the deal. And then a lot of that stuff shifts to then, operations teams or whatever. But again, here's the thing. When I was in that industry and I was like a shipper, it wasn't just like me. Like, I was the director, I had managers, the managers had supervisors and whatever. And we were regularly talking about the carriers and whatever. So it's like, go back and nurture the relationships with the people that for the business that you already have, because one, it makes you stronger within the organization, but two, people bounce around these days. They move to new organizations. They take promotions into other places. So it's like, well, they're going to think of you when they get into that new role, or you want them to think of you when they get into that new role, right? So if my team, my management team was 30 people deep. Okay, well, if you had great relationships with those 30 people, if 5 of them moved different organizations, and then those 5 people then kind of, you rebuild those relationships with their teams that might be at least another 5 or 10 people each. Now all of a sudden you've got this like network from where you started with one customer, 30 people, where you might have only been managing 5 relationships. Now all of a sudden you're into 5 other organizations, where each of them have 10 connections. And then what happens when those people move on? So that's where I think that like so much of the industry is focused on very fast and transactional ROI, and not enough on the fact of like, my goal is to really make sure that more people speak about me in the right way. And I'm building this deep pipeline, because 12 months from now and 18 months from now, it's really going to matter. The challenge why that doesn't happen, though, is because the sales and the marketing people move around just as much. So it makes it difficult for them to invest that way. But I think it's wildly under leveraged.
Yeah. So just for clarity, when you say nurture relationships, what does that look like?
Like reaching back out and saying, hey, like, I was talking to our ops people, like, it seems like you guys have been having these challenges, or things are going well, or they're telling me it's going well. Like, what are your thoughts? Like, what would you change? If you had a wish list, what would you have built out tomorrow, type of thing. Like, different ways that you can kind of just keep the conversation going, like just doing a check-in. Like, it's not hard to call someone that literally you're selling $1 million, $2 million, $10 million worth of freight to a year, and just saying like, hey, how are things? Like, you know what I mean? Like, because everybody reaches out when they're hungry and they want something, but continue those relationships and keep reaching out to those people even once they're in the pipeline, because they're always a source of information. Because even if you already have them locked down, if they're saying, X, Y, and Z about the industry or their types of challenges or stuff, it now gives you even potentially more understanding of what's going on, keeps you current. You can then leverage that and saying, hey, we're working with this customer. They're seeing these kinds of challenges. We're actually working on this opportunity with them. Maybe that's something that you guys are facing as well. Now, all of a sudden, it gives you this way of continuing a conversation in a different way with new clients as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's a final piece of advice that you give a service provider looking to refine their value proposition and compete in today's market?
I really think that you need to keep testing different things, right? Like, keep trying sort of different ways to improve your business with the customers that you have already, because what you're trying to do is find out what creates the most value for them. Because if it creates a lot of value for them, the likelihood is that then you're going to have a service offer or a broader value proposition that you can sell to someone else. So when I was in the cash and transit industry, one of the things that I was a big proponent of was doing like value added reporting and doing a different type of way to do a business review with the customers, because of the fact that the competitors couldn't do it. Like, our systems were better, our data was better, our ability to do these types of things was like way ahead. So it's like, well, why wouldn't we take advantage of it? So instead of trying to sell it as a value, like sell it as an extra service, it's like, try to keep your baseline pricing and the stuff that has harder costs there, and don't discount on the rates per se, but include more of these things that didn't have necessarily as much of an impact to the business to kind of either discount or give away for free, or to roll into a broader service offer, right? Just because of the fact that your goal is to make sure that you're creating the biggest ROI for the customer and solving the most problems for them. And very often that would mean stuff that they're doing, having to check, would love to not have to manage in the same way and stuff like that. So I would be testing all of these things and trying to find out like what makes my current customers happier, and then being like, okay, how do I package this and resell it?
Yeah, that'll definitely make a provider more successful for sure. So To end the shows, I like to ask my guests to share some secret sauce. Maybe it's something, something that like maybe it's an inside tip you have, like some piece of information that's not super well known, something that's maybe made you successful or somebody else successful that you can kind of share to say, hey, take this and go forth, and I hope you achieve what you're trying to do.
Yeah, for sure. So from a service provider side, right? Like your biggest thing that you need to manage is to make sure that you're running as like efficiently as effectively as you can, right? So that you can kind of keep the largest margin in your operations. So many people get handcuffed by thinking that they can't make improvements to their business, or that they can't like sort of increase that profitability because they don't have enough information, or they don't have accurate enough information, or they don't record this or they don't record that. That is like a barrier and a stumbling block. The biggest thing that you can do to make improvements to your business is just be measuring something that you want to improve the same way and be consistent with it. And then you measure it before and after you change something, and you just see what happens. It doesn't really matter if the numbers are 100% right,
Mhm.
or if like everything is 100% like to the second, or it's all that accurate. Because what you really want to focus on all the time when you're trying to continually improve your performance, so that you can be the most competitive in the market, is just understanding is what was the impact of me doing this? What did it have? Was it better or worse? Did
Mhm.
it do what I expected or not? And then why? And don't overcomplicate it. These things are a lot simpler than they seem, and you can make huge improvements to your business just by understanding like essentially what happens when you press that button, and what happens when you press it, or you have that lever, and what happens when I push it all the way up versus pull it all the way back. And you don't have to always be super scientific about it. You just want to understand like what that like action and reaction kind of connection is.
Yeah. Well, John, thank you so much for all the insight and advice that you've shared with us. Can you tell us how guests can reach out to you if they have any questions?
Yeah, for sure. So a bunch of different ways. So you see my name there. That's my profile name on LinkedIn. You can find me there. I post all the time. You can get me at john@operationalinnovations.ca. I am Canadian, so you can't hold that against me, but I do a ton of work in the US and Canada and Europe. And then you can also hit operationalinnovations.ca. It'll bring you to a landing page where you can send me an email or anything like that, or book time directly with me as well.
Yeah. Well, this was a great conversation, extremely insightful, and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. It's awesome, and always love talking shop with people in the space. And there's one thing is that logistics is simple but not easy.
So many complexities.